นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Today was this wonderful day. Even the weather cooperated, bring sunshine. And yesterday it looked rather dismal here, and today it's all bright and sunny. And this year has been a very auspicious year for me especially. It's not only the 60th reign of His Majesty King Bhumibol in Thailand, 60 years as king. So that's one during this year. And then it was my 40th Vasa and 72nd birthday. It all seemed to come together this particular year. Plus, the Sangha here in the UK is in real harmony. There hasn't been any discord this year. And that is a miracle. So, anyway, it's very... and also, this is the 50th year of the English Sangha Trust, the EST. So the EST has been the charitable organization set up 50 years ago, 1956, here in England, with a Venerable Kapilavatthu Bhikkhu, an English Bhikkhu at that time, had this idea of establishing foundation so that Buddhist monks could come and live in the UK. So this was his idea, the Venerable Kapilavatthu, who passed away many years ago. And so it was set up deliberately in an intentional way to support Buddhist monks and nuns, so that that's its purpose. It was never set up as some kind of just Buddhist foundation, but it was established particularly to make it possible for alms mendicants, Theravada alms mendicants, to live in this country. And so when I arrived in 1976 was the first time I came. The EST owned the Hampstead Vihara in London, and that was moribund, nobody in it. And the previous year, Venerable Ajahn Mahabua had visited England with the Venerable Panyavado, English Bhikkhu, and they had stayed at this Vihara in Hampstead, and so the Hampstead Vihara, the chairman George Sharp was asking Venerable Mahabua about establishing something in the UK, and so Ajahn Mahabua said, well, just you have to wait. That he didn't have anybody, and so it was a matter of waiting. So George kind of closed the Vihara down, and then when I came in 1976, on the way back to Thailand from the United States, I spent 3 days. This was the hot summer of 1976, and so it was like one of these. I had this incredibly good impression of the warm, sunny English climate. because people still talk about the long hot summer of 1976. So anyway, that's when I first visited, and at first I asked to stay at the Buddhapatipa, the Thai temple, which was then in East Sheen. It wasn't in Wimbledon, and they were quite willing to have me, but they were full up. They didn't have it, so I'd have to live with about 3 other monks in one room, and then Ajahn Panyavada, the British monk, had told me to contact George Sharp. So he'd given me the address of George Sharp, who was at that time the chairman of the English Sangha Trust. So, seeing the crowded conditions at Wat Buddhapatipa, I phoned George Sharp, and he immediately came, took me to the Hampstead Vihara. And from there, he kept coming and seeing me during the 3 or 4 days that I was in London, and seemed very interested and wanted me to stay on it. So I said, well, I can't really do that. You have to come to Thailand and talk this over with my teacher, Thanajan Cha in Ubon in northeast Thailand. So George came a few months later to Thailand, and Ajahn Chah put him to the great test. I told Ajahn Chah about this situation here, and he didn't commit himself in any way, just looked his usual bemused expression without showing either aversion or interest. So I didn't know what to expect. So when George Sharp came, then he treated George not very nicely at first, and I think Ajahn Chah had a way of testing your mettle to see what you were made of, and George, of course, managed to accept everything, and eventually it was agreed upon that he invited Ajahn Chah and myself to come and live in London, the Hampstead Vihara. Come to see anyway, come to inspect the situation. So we arrived in England on May 6th, 1977. What's one of those memorable days? So this is actually my 30th year in living in England. So over that time, the idea was to establish a forest monastery, and so we weren't keen on living in London, but Ajahn Chah said to stay in London until we had more of a feeling and opportunities to know the situation. So we stayed in the Hampstead Vihara, and we went on the alms round every day. He told us to go Bindabat, and of course near Hampstead Heath, a rather nice part of London, is a good walk, so you could walk out of the Hampstead Vihara, walk up on Hampstead Heath in the morning, watch all these wealthy people walking their Afghan hounds, and we used to see the most peculiar people up there in the morning, and very seldom got any food. But during that time, of course, we met the gentleman that offered us the property in Chithurst. And during that 2 years in London, it was pretty. There was Ajahn Virtamo and Ajahn Anando with me, and it was pretty tight squeeze. So at that time in Oxford, there was the Oakenholt Buddhist Center, owned by Mr. and Mrs. Saw. And so they invited us, made an open invitation for us to come and stay there whenever we had the occasion. So we had a relief during that 2 years of living in this lovely estate in Oxford. And there we started giving retreats, and first meditation retreat I ever gave was at the Oakenholt Buddhist Center. in Oxford. So then, when we acquired Chithurst, then that was in 1979. We moved out of London. We'd sold the Hampstead Vihara in order to buy the property in West Sussex. So during this time, this experiment, because all this time this was an experiment. Ajahn Chah only stayed in England about a month, and then went back to Thailand. And I remember standing at Heathrow Airport, saying goodbye to Ajahn Chah, and then he left, went through the departure gates. And I felt bereft, like being abandoned in this strange country. How are you going to survive as a Buddhist monk in a non-Buddhist country? Now, Luang Por Chah always had this wisdom and faith in the goodness of human beings. And this always impressed me, because having an American background, you kind of don't think people are basically good. You kind of assume that they're basically selfish, and they think of themselves, and it's a kind of cynical, negative attitude that I had, about the human nature in general. Well, if you'd have asked me at the time about human nature, I would have said basically self-centered, selfish, and vain. Well, and because I could see those qualities in myself. But Luang Por Chah, he never went along with that. And when I had my doubts about coming to live here in England, I asked him, how was I expected to keep all the Vinaya rules, not handle money and all that, if you're living in a society that doesn't understand what you are. It was very strange, an anachronism in the whole European context. And so he said, well, wherever there are good people, you can go there. He said, are there good people in England? I said, well, I'm sure there are. He said, well, you can go. That impressed me, because I've always remembered that as a statement of Luang Por Chah's recognition of the goodness that is our humanity. And this I began to see is very necessary, to recognize that human beings are basically good. Because at this time, it is a very cynical age that we're living in, here and everywhere in the world. It's very materialistic and of course caters to selfishness, self-centeredness, and vanity. The modern society definitely encourages these qualities of being self-centered and vain. And you can see that the result is in general confusion, and even in an affluent society like this one, there's so much suffering, unhappiness, depression, drug addiction, alcoholism, mental illness, and all the rest. And yet, in a country, society basically well-run, stable, economically prosperous. And yet, the misery is not because of the political structure or the economics, but the way we think. We create this misery, this suffering, this negativity. And of course, this is what the Buddha was pointing to 2,550 years ago. All even numbers, isn't it? So I'm not giving any lottery numbers. So. Luang Por Chah was very much anti, superstition or anything like that. But